Hey guys.
Hey everybody.
How are you?
How is everybody this week?
Doing good. I was just saying, I just had a birthday, turned 56 on Thursday.
Yay, happy birthday.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. And I Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I was at my daughter's bachelorette getaway with her and her bridal party. And we had so much fun, and I am tired.
I'll bet.
Yes, but it was a lot of fun. It was definitely a ton of fun. So,
hey, let me tell people real quick, if you guys, if anybody out there wants to join us, I have put the link in my chat, but I don't think the people on your chat can see that. So you guys might want to drop the link in your chats as well.
okay.
So if you've read the book and you have something that you want to talk about with us, regarding the book and just whatever, then come on in. Hey, Darth.
All right.
Darth, do you want to join us this week?
Yeah. If so, just follow the link.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Did you guys get my... Oh, here's Darth.
The link.
Hey.
Hey.
Did you guys get my... Oh, here's Darth.
The link. Hey. You got to close out. You got to close out the other where you were watching, or you're going to have an echo.
Oh, not that one.
Not that one. Yeah, you got to.
Speaking of Windows,
close out YouTube, and then you can come on in, and otherwise they'll have an echo. So that's what happened to me the first time I used StreamYard.
Me too. Okay. Here
there we go.
Okay, I put it in my chat too.
Yes, awesome.
Hey,
okay, you have to close YouTube out, or it's going to echo.
Hey, so what's your real name?
Charlie.
Charlie, nice to meet you, Charlie.
Nice to meet you,
Charlie.
And where do you live?
Indianapolis.
Okay,
okay.
Awesome, cool.
And he's got a rebounder in the background, I see.
Yeah. That thing is no joke.
That looks similar to mine. Mine has the green around it, and So do you use it a lot?
Yeah. Like if I'm on hold on customer service, I'll be bouncing on the rebounder for a little bit, or I'm watching TV. It's just a good way to get some movement, get some activity.
Oh yeah, awesome, excellent. So are you low carb? Are you carnivore? I mean, your thing is Darth Carnivore. So I'm assuming you're carnivore. How long have you been carnivore?
I'm more carnivore now. I've been carnivore since June of last year, and then I was keto before that. So altogether, I've lost a little over 170 pounds in about 18 months.
Wow!
Wow!
That's incredible.
Yeah, huzzah for sure. That's amazing.
So do you have do you make videos on your channel? And nope, you don't?
Oh, you should.
I don't have any social media. I don't have a channel. Commenting in the chats is about as social as I get.
So this is kind of a new thing for you to actually come on to a live stream then.
Yeah, this is my first time participating in a live stream. I've been in the chat several times.
Well, you're a natural. I can tell already.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we see you all the time. I mean, seriously. So, wow. So 170 pounds. That's incredible. So how has that changed your life?
It's changed it incredibly. The biggest thing is just having energy to do things, not on any caffeine or anything like that. So it's just, I didn't think this level of energy was possible on a day in, day out basis without some form of caffeination. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Wow. I'm glad you joined us today. You've been reading the book along with us.
Yeah, I'm caught up to chapter 5. I've been kind of keeping notes in my OneNote thing here of different quotes that I thought were interesting. So
awesome. Excellent. Well, we'll hopefully get to know you a little bit better, but why don't we get started? Kim, I know you're the team lead here, so
well, you can go ahead. I gotta open my book still.
Okay, so we did chapters 4 and 5 this week, and because last week we tried 3 chapters and we were kind of getting to the, really having to kind of skip over a bunch of stuff. So we talked last time and figured we're going to try to do a little bit of an approach of maybe doing a summary, like a summary of the chapter, and then we can each kind of go around and talk about some key points that we found really interesting about the chapter. So I honestly, I liked chapter 4 a lot, and it was so interesting, and I was like super interested in chapter 5.
Yeah.
Chapter 5 for me was even more exciting. But chapter 4 is called The Flawed Science of Saturated versus Polyunsaturated Fats. So it goes further into basically how things developed and the science developed on the association between heart disease and fat, and the flawed science that happened over the course of decades. So she goes through basically, I mean, she's kind of chronologically going through how all of the ideas developed, and a lot of the studies that were done, of course, nutritional studies, as we've talked about, are very difficult to actually be scientific. But she talks a lot on, oils coming into it and all the different oils that came into the picture. And also a lot of these trials that were done, how they were basically, there were other issues that creeped up. So they were looking for the association between saturated fat and cholesterol was kind of the big thing, and linking that to heart disease. And they published these studies like they were successes, and neglected to talk about the increases in other health conditions. So that's kind of to me, what I got out of the gist of chapter 4 was kind of high level what she was talking about. So
yeah, and what was really stunning to me is they really stretched it in terms of finding something positive or spinning it, because when you really got into the meat of the matter, it ended up showing like all of these studies that she talked about, like for example, the anti-coronary club, that was the first one, and that's one that's used to promote this diet heart hypothesis. And that was the one that kind of spearheaded the rest of them too. And it goes into, let's see, the diet, they went into the diet, and then the headline was diet linked to cut in heart attacks. But of course, what ended up happening is time passed. They kind of jumped the gun a little bit, because yes, the cholesterol did go down. So some of what they would consider markers might have given the indication. I mean, the diet was doing what they wanted it to do in terms of lowering the cholesterol.
Right.
But what ended up happening is 26 members of the club died during the trial, compared to only 6 from the control group.
Yeah.
And that was something that just, they, for whatever reason, well, we know why. I mean, they didn't want to really say that, because that would go against their, okay, so if they have, let's just pretend that somebody does, that there are fewer instances of heart attacks, for example, but then if there's more incidents of everything else, that's not going to be
mortality.
Yeah, that's not going to make anybody want to do that, or make anybody believe that that's a better route to take. But and incidentally, Joliffe, I'm not sure how you pronounce that name, Jolliffe, had died of a heart attack in 1961, which was
the one who was
the one who had the book. There was a book, I think, that he had done.
He was one of the authors of the final report of the trial.
Reduce and stay reduced on the prudent diet, which was the whole basis of this study, was using what they called the prudent diet to demonstrate that eating this way would cause fewer incidents of heart disease. And of course, the study ended up, yes, the cholesterol markers and things like that were improved, but the death is, I was just really stunned by that 26 members of the club had died during the trial compared to only 6 from the control, and 8 members of the club had died of heart attacks, but none from the control.
Yeah.
And the fact that they try to hide it, you know, it's like just kind of buried in there, wasn't really highlighted, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So Charlie, what did you what did you get out of this chapter?
I don't know. There was one sentence that I thought really kind of summed it up for me. It was on page 79, according to the Kindle edition, but it said, in the same way that any number of zeros can never add up to 1, these studies, even taken together, cannot really amount to a convincing pile of evidence, but they have nevertheless endured over time. So Carrie was pointing out how that anti-coronary club trial was kind of underwhelming, you know, in terms of a silver bullet for, you know, the idea that saturated fat causes heart disease. There were like a string of trials done after the fact. So it wasn't due to lack of effort or lack of trying that they tried to prove it after the fact, but I don't know, a lot of them were just kind of underwhelming. One of the criticisms of like Carnivore, especially, you know, like the saturated fat version that I do is, you know, where are the long-term studies? The assumption being that the current dietary approach of being low fat has, you know, a number of silver bullets lined up in its favor. But Ms. Teicholz really points out that even though there's a lot of trials there, a lot of them are just kind of underwhelming individually and even taken collectively. So I thought that for me was kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah, and just in reading through all of the information that she provides, it's just interesting. It seems like every single trial that she talks about in this book, she brings up all these factors that they didn't include in their report that were either made the trial itself, you know, not really valid, or things like Carrie was talking about that, okay, they initially reported it as good on the short term because it lowered cholesterol, but then when they followed up a decade later, the all-cause mortality was high. And so there's like, they had, obviously it was an ideology for them because they were tweaking the data to get the results that they wanted. And that was shown, like you said, over and over and over again. There was always something wrong with the study.
And basically,
one of the trials that
sorry, Carrie.
Oh, that's okay.
Go ahead.
One of them was, oh gosh, this is frustrating. And I apologize. I should have written this down. I've got it marked in the book, but one of them, they ended up having trans fats. It's that the Oslo study, the one where they were the hospital. It was a hospital in Oslo.
Yeah.
And they ended up including trans fats in the people's diet, which I mean, we all know how bad trans fats are, and they were consuming like 4 times the number of trans fats than the trans fats that were consumed by Americans when those were taken off the market. And so right there, so yes, there were some results in that one that might have gone the way of the diet heart hypothesis, but then when you throw that big monkey wrench into it, it's no wonder.
Right. It was never just polyunsaturated versus saturated fats.
Mm-hmm.
The saturated fat group, which was their control group, was also eating margarine, hydrogenated fish oils, which were staples of the Norwegian diet, and amounting to nearly a half a cup of trans fats per day. And then also it says the experimental group they also cut out tobacco use by 45% more than the control group, which is huge.
Yeah, because smoking, and I'm not sure exactly when the powers that be or whatever, when science determined that smoking was such a contributor to heart disease. I mean, I presume it was like in the late 60s and in the 70s that people made that connection, because then it wasn't too far after that, in the like mid 80s, where there was the big push for people to, quit smoking and all of that. But still, I believe it's been pretty well known for quite some time that smoking causes heart disease and the inflammation and all of that. So it just stands to reason that if you didn't factor that in, that your study, and you're basing any result on food alone or diet alone, that's seriously flawed, in my opinion, and in Ms. Teicholz's opinion too.
Yeah. So Kim, you were going to say something. You're muted.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't ready to talk yet.
Oh my goodness.
All right. So basically what I gather from this chapter, it's very similar to the other books that we've read. There have been a lot of studies that have basically shown not much evidence for their stance, and they've just tried to cram it in there anyway, make it fit a square peg in a round hole. Just to put it at the basic level. You can go into all these studies, which are all very deep and involved, but then when you get right down to it, it's like, oh, okay, that didn't really prove it. Once again, didn't really prove it. So we have several studies that he talks about, or that she talks about, I'm sorry. And they're just, it's the evidence is just not there. Basically everything's been built on this pseudoscience. So, and we are the ones that have suffered from it.
These are the studies that they actually will cite.
Yeah.
Supporting their
it's
argument.
Like, this is the best. This is the best they've got, folks. Like, this is what we're up against.
And so I've heard,
it's laughable.
Yeah. And I've heard Dr. Chafee and Dr. Berry both say that there is no science that supports any diet, other than the fact if you want to look at like paleo science and physiology and that type of thing, the isotopes and all that. But in terms of like modern trials, so when people try to say, what is the science behind keto and carnivore, and how can you prove this and whatever? Well, there is not any science that proves the low fat. And in fact, it's pretty damning if you really get into the details.
And more studies have been done on the ketogenic diet than any diet ever. And that's sad.
And they're actually positive.
That's wild that we don't have more studies done on the standard American diet that we've been recommended for, how many years now?
It seems like the consensus is that the science is settled.
Yeah.
With standard. And so, to go against that, I mean, you can see what happened with this guy, Aarons, who was always challenging, right? He was, having trouble. He had trouble getting grants. His career was affected by the fact that he was always out there trying to challenge. And as I'm reading her talking about the things he was challenging, was not saying you're totally wrong necessarily. He was saying the science wasn't done well. And he was just challenging their methodology and their conclusions, saying you don't have the evidence to back this. Your study does not present the evidence to back your conclusions. And so it didn't seem like he was going to any extreme in what he was saying in his challenge to them. It was just, we need better science.
And then really one of the things about this chapter that was really interesting to me was how vegetable oils became the king of the kitchen section. So basically they were talking about how people came to see vegetable oil as the healthiest possible kind of fat. It was, one of the most astonishing changes in our attitudes about diet in the 20th century. And the change in consumption was just astronomical. And basically they went in through the housewives and made them think that, oh, this is the way you should go. And this it won't smell up your kitchen. And,
or go
and
rancid. They
yeah. And they were
a lot of
actually sending all of our animal fats overseas, basically.
I was surprised by that.
I was too. I was surprised to read that. And I know, because originally all of these seed oils were not even considered for consumption. They were for other, they were used for other reasons. Oil, the oils, they were not supposed to be for people to eat. But that definitely changed. Yeah, I know it's interesting because I grew up on, my mom using Crisco, and Imperial margarine was the only thing on our table. And she used that for baking. And I remember the Mazola oil and,
oh yeah,
and she never had real butter, and she never had tallow or lard or anything like that. I grew up on seed oils, which is, explains a lot when it comes to my health. And sometimes I wonder how long does it take to reverse the damage from, having your early life and your pivotal years being fed that,
And of course, the AHA endorsed them for heart health in 1961. So that just, basically put the stamp of approval. Everybody should be doing this.
Yeah, and so basically it was sold to the women, who were the cooks at that time, the household cooks, and it was sold to them as new and modern and more healthy. And like you were saying, less mess in the kitchen, and so
didn't stink.
Won't stink up your kitchen. Your parlor should not smell like food.
But then what was funny though is with the margarine, it was a harder sell, which I didn't realize. But people weren't quite as ready to accept the margarine as they were the oils. I didn't realize that. I just thought that everybody just jumped on all of it, the whole bandwagon, so to speak, but they didn't.
Well, it was interesting because he said on page 84 of the book itself, it said, unbeknownst to consumers, manufacturers had also been sneaking cottonseed oil into butter from the 1860s on as a way of reducing costs.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was surprised to read that. So people were getting cottonseed oil in their butter long before they were knowing that they were eating seed oils. But it doesn't say what percentage of the butter was cottonseed oil, just so that they were sneaking it in. But that was really
I wonder why. Why did it say why? I don't remember that part.
For money, as a way of reducing costs.
Okay. I was going to say, would it make it more spreadable? Butter is kind of a pain.
I don't know. It was costs. But the cotton plantations, they realized, they found out that they could get oil from the cotton seeds. But in America, we didn't consider it acceptable for cooking or baking, but it says that didn't stop some companies from mixing the oil with beef fat to make a compound lard. And then it says Swift and Company, for instance, introduced a product called cotton suet in 1893. Yeah. And then it talks about them sneaking into butter since the 1860s. So that's not disclosing that is, I think it's good now that we have nutrition labels, where they are supposed to list what they put into our products. Not that it stops anybody from eating anything that's unhealthy, but I think that this was probably before the time where they were required to report what they were putting in it. if considering it was considered fuel and not edible, can you imagine what people would have thought back then if they knew?
Yeah, I mean, it was
My little puppy.
primarily used to make like soap and candles, and it
Right.
was more utilitarian than, and it was an oil, obviously, for lubrication.
Right.
So it wasn't intended for people to eat at all. I mean, you just stop and think. It says in here, like, I think it was, I can't remember. I think it was the butter, actually, though. They noticed the appearance. Maybe it wasn't the butter. Anyway, the appearance, and somebody just got a bright idea. Oh, okay. Well, let's see if we can just give this to
Does it
people
look
and make it
yellow?
into a product. Yeah, yeah.
Does it look like butter? They
Mhm,
said,
mhm.
let's use it for butter. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I'd heard that before. So, but the whole thing is that it was still just the premises that these oils would reduce your cholesterol.
Mhm.
And cholesterol got a bad name early on. And, we know now just from the things that we've learned as carnivores that we need the cholesterol. And, the other things that happened in these studies to people, like the increase in cancer and the increase in all these other health conditions. Let's see, where was that? That was later on in the chapter. They talked about an increase in colon cancer.
Mhm.
When you lower cholesterol, they're suspecting possible increase in cirrhosis with having corn oil. It says people who successfully lowered their cholesterol in trials of diet or drugs turned out to have higher rates of gallstones. In Japan, they found that they were studying the Japanese because they tend to have lower cholesterol levels, but they found that they had more strokes, 2 to 3 times higher rate of strokes than in people with higher cholesterol, and also cerebral hemorrhages,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting. So there's all of these downsides. And then there was this committee that was supposed to be studying this, and they said they considered the downside of cancer to be less important than the upside of reducing heart disease. So they made a decision for the American public that they were going to recommend reducing cholesterol and not tell us that we were increasing our risk of all these other conditions.
But here's the thing. Does it make sense that cholesterol, or for that matter, just anything that would be of a health benefit, like let's say that reducing your cholesterol was supposed to be this health benefit, but that at the same time increases your risk for cancer? It doesn't. So likewise, I just think that in other words, the body, and if we eat what we're designed, any animal, more animals, if we, whoever we are, whatever species we are, if we eat what we're designed to eat, and people can debate to what extent they should be carnivores or whatever, but I mean, for example, I was stunned, and that may be the next chapter, I'm not sure, but the misconception about what early Americans ate.
Yes,
but the whole point
that is the next chapter. Yes.
Yeah. But the whole point is, though, but the cholesterol, it's okay. So you avoid heart attacks, but yet your increase in cancer risk, that doesn't make sense to me. It's good over here, but then it's not over here. But we're going to tell you to reduce it because heart disease is the thing.
Yeah, we're deciding for you that you would rather, address heart disease than cancer. But as we've seen from these studies, so many of them reported on short-term results, which often were statistically insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you look at the longer term, you can see that there actually were dying of heart attacks and their mortality was increased. And it wasn't just other diseases. It's kind of like if you have you have a low fat diet, you have these oils that you're eating, and they supposedly are protective of the heart, but yet they are linked to increases in other things like cancer. Like, it doesn't make sense that something could be good for one part of the body and bad for
Right.
another part of the body. So to me, logically, I would question the leap they're taking, saying lowering cholesterol, therefore, is going to prevent heart disease, because they've shown in their studies long-term that it doesn't. It's like, if it's going to be causing cancer, it's going to be causing strokes, it's going to be causing all of these issues with your liver and your gallbladder, then ultimately, why wouldn't it be hurting your heart in the long term too?
And it reminds me of like the same type of thinking that people do when you tell them, "Oh, I've lost this weight. I've got all 15 different medications, all this stuff." And they say, "Oh, but what's your LDL
What about
cholesterol?"
your LDL? Right. Right.
I'm just
Exactly.
like, what my most recent response is, whether or not I actually care or not, none of their business. I just say, I don't care.
Yeah.
Don't know, don't care. I actually do know, and I only somewhat care.
Yeah.
Well, it's sad because it's been beaten into us, and so you still have that niggling doubt in the back of your mind, am I somehow harming myself? Even though the more we learn, the more we realize that this is a bunch of hooey.
Yeah.
We've been told and misled, and there are a lot of players in the play, so to speak, a lot of bad actors that have contributed to this whole situation, and it kind of became the perfect storm when you have the sugar companies and the food products organization and just all these people, plus you have some of the religious element too with the Seventh-day Adventists, and so all of these things just kind of came together, and they were all had the same goal, and they didn't want to look at anything or the possibility that what they were saying was false. They didn't want to acknowledge any issue, and it seems to me like they got very extremely defensive. Like Miss Teicholz had interviewed several people who had been involved in these things, and like there was when questioned, just defensive about how the data was presented, and then one person had selective memory.
That was the guy that worked with Keys. What's his name?
Chandler.
Chandler.
Yeah.
Yeah. He forgot about all of these other diseases that these people developed. And when she interviewed him. But I mean, and so they taught, there's a whole section on selection bias. And that's kind of the overriding thing, is that these people had developed this bias, and they kind of they made the studies around their already belief in the fact that they, the saturated fats were bad for you. Let's see. Oh, this was funny. Okay, this was something funny. You guys might have figured this was funny too, but I wanted to bring it up. The study from Israel. They followed 10,000 male civil service and government employees for 5 years, found no correlation between heart attacks and anything they ate. But this is what they did find from the study. The best way to avoid a heart attack, according to the study, was to worship God, since the more men identified themselves as being religious, the lower was their risk of having a heart attack.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Probably their stress levels were down because they had community and,
and they probably were involved in the meditation and all, and community. That was another thing that she brought up, is that the involvement in community was a factor in your health, which is
But ironically, you don't really want to be. You want to be reclusive and not involved in community when you're eating a SAD diet. And it's just like when you get the proper food in your body, you actually feel a lot more social.
And
I mean, even as far as like going online and talking like this, and it's. I mean, we've got Darth in here. You know?
right.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I love meeting new people that are in the carnivore community. But last night my husband and I were invited over to have dinner at a coworker's house, one of his coworkers, and they they made us steaks, and they were very interested in questioning about our diet and everything, and it was really good. It was cool. It was like, you know, eh, I think there's people that are going to look at you weird, but there's other people that are just seem to be genuinely interested. And it helps where like I can show before and after pictures. I'm sure Charlie, you probably can too, because of all the weight you've lost. It's like when you have dramatic before and after pictures, it definitely makes a different type of an impression for sure. And with me, like I have two sets of before and after pictures. Like I've got the weight pictures, but I also have the rosacea before and after. And the rosacea is extreme as far as the difference. And I think that like when I show people that that kind of takes them aback, because they're like expecting maybe the weight loss, but the actual like skin is interesting.
so
Yes,
Darth,
good to see.
Oh, Simpson.
what do you think? What do you think about what is your most exciting thing that's resulted from carnivore? Is it just purely the weight loss for you, or what do you think?
Just the ability to, I don't know, do things in life, get things done, be part of my daughter's life, be more actively engaged as a person. When I had the 170 pounds plus, I would wake up just thinking, can I get through the day?
Right.
Because I had a lot of weight to carry and a lot less energy. So I would just be very passive in my experiences with life. But now I'm very active, and I'm, wanting to get things done. I'm able to be, really productive, engaged in a meaningful way. The energy, it's just hard, and just how good I feel on a daily basis. I think that's something you can't undervalue. Just how good you feel on a day in, day out basis. Good, eating the foods, eating the meats. So that's just something I take a moment to internally appreciate every day. So, I don't go astray. So
Yeah. No, that's really important. And because I mean, I don't know if you're like a lot of us, but like I didn't realize how bad I felt on a daily basis until I started to feel better.
Yep.
And then it was like,
And,
oh my goodness. Like I didn't
and
know
I had felt a lot better on
this way.
keto, but it was weird. The carnivore, it just kind of flipped the switch. So it wasn't that I was just feeling awful, but before carnivore, because it was sort of I just sort of slid into it. It was just a gradual progression. And then my neighbor gave me all that meat, and, it happened from there. But it was just, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And you just, like you said, you just have no idea that, because I still had that anxiety. It had gotten a lot better on keto, but just that little bit of veg that I was having apparently was still too much. It's amazing.
I've told you guys this before, I know, but in the beginning, especially, but I still have some of this now. I had some periods that I thought, am I bipolar? Is this a mania? I mean, I felt that much joy, just so happy. I'm like, is this what we're supposed to feel like? Maybe I just never have felt it before. I don't know.
I want to know
I'm not bipolar.
What is a house hippo?
But it scared me. It really did, because I thought, oh crap, I must be bipolar, and I've sent myself into a manic episode, a hypomania.
You feel good. Okay, William.
God forbid you feel good, right?
William McCartney that you just had up there. What is a house hippo?
I presume it's his dog.
I don't know. I saw that. I'm like, what?
I hope it's not his wife.
I thought maybe there was supposed to be a comma there, and he was calling us a hippo. He's walking his house.
Walking his house. hippo.
House
House
hippo.
hippo
I think
equals
he's talking about his dog.
Oh, Robin said house hippo equals dog. Oh, that's funny. I've never heard that before.
I've never heard that either.
That is funny. That's funny. Awesome. Okay. Are you guys ready to move on to chapter 5?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. So, let's see. Okay. One of you want to summarize chapter 5?
Well,
Let's just
basically,
get into
chapter
it.
5 is just how the whole train just kept, it picked up speed, and the government decided that we needed to have guidelines for people that, people needed to know and be guided to eat more healthily. And so with all of the studies about low fat and everything, and the fact that that was picking up steam, there were people who believed that Americans should be told that this is what they needed to eat. And so it started in 1977. The Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs decided to, they had a budget of nearly $500,000, which was back in 1977. So that was quite a bit of money. And they were questioning overnutrition, whether eating too much of certain foods might lead to disease. And so then Senator George McGovern, who just happened to have been to what was that guy's name? He had gone to it's not Ornish, but anyway, it was one of those people like that. But he had got Pritikin, Nathan Pritikin.
Oh, yeah.
He had been to a Pritikin seminar. And so he was, of course, Pritikin was vegetarian. And so that contributed to the whole low fat, it fit right in. And so he was not, McGovern was not an impartial observer. In other words, he already had a preconceived notion of what would be considered healthy.
A bias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then there was Mark Hagstead, was a professor of nutrition at Harvard School of Public Health. And there was and this is interesting because who is the Nick Mottern, 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 maybe, I don't know, but he spearheaded the research and writing of the report, but he didn't have any kind of scientific and not to say that a person without a scientific background or a medical background couldn't have an opinion, but I mean, he wrote these guidelines. So
one thing that really shocked me is that here's this guy. He was basically, like you said, he wasn't in the scientific community. It says he was a conscientious progressive, a former labor reporter for the small weekly newsletter Consumer News in Washington, D.C., and a crusader against corporate influence. So he's basically a reporter, a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that coined the term complex carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Well, like, what? A journalist created that term? And that term is used by doctors.
Yes.
That blew my mind when I read that.
And used to justify eating healthy whole grains versus sugar. It was designed to separate, because it used to be common knowledge. I mean, carbohydrate converted to glucose, and it didn't matter the source. But if it's a complex carbohydrate, then that makes it different.
It's just slower.
Yeah, but, well, I know it's slower and it still converts to glucose, but but people think it's better because of that terminology. And like you said, doctors use it. Even the science community uses it.
Well, nutritionists, dietitians.
Yeah, for sure.
Did they even know that it was a journalist that coined this phrase? It didn't even originate from within their field. That was just, blew my mind. So, nuts. But I didn't realize how much the guy, Nick Mottern,
Mm-hmm.
was so key in this. So this report, the report that he ended up writing, was basically became, after some back and forth,
Yep.
became the official report for the government. Yes. And it was backed by the government. And one thing that was interesting too is that, like in this chapter, she's talking about how before the government, any involvement that the government had in this, like this, the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs, they were always looking at like people who are undernourished and hunger issues, and trying to help deal with that sort of an issue. And then now they're looking at the question of overnutrition and getting specific about what foods we should be eating instead of just dealing with hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it completely changed the way that they, their focus as a committee and got government involved in telling us what to eat. And this guy, Nick, was the guy whose report they went with.
And he had an agenda too, because he was against like big meat, the egg industry, and all the beef industry and all of these. But of course, it's pot, meat, kettle, because you had the sugar industry and all of the packaged food companies over here, because that was just perfect for them, to have these guidelines come out to tell people to eat this sort of thing, because that was exactly what they did. I mean, they manufactured these things, and they supported it. So it's like, maybe there was lobbying by the beef industry and, the poultry and eggs and all of these. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, there was lobbying from all over the place, I guess is my point. And so it's like you criticize over here, but then it's happening over here on your side too. So you can't really. But he had an axe to grind, and he was successful at it.
Yeah. Well,
and then he was very biased against red meat specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And,
yes.
He basically was mad that big cattle, the big cattle lobby was so strong in the 1970s, and he what surprised me was that even Ansel Keys and his people, they didn't think that red meat specifically was the bad saturated fat. They didn't distinguish between that or any other saturated fat or cholesterol food. They hated them all equally. Well, this guy had a thing against red meat, and mainly from just, he felt like it was impure and unhealthy, and and then now that's gotten ingrained into our societal beliefs.
Yeah, it's like it was this evolution, like you said, Ansel Keys, and he was more like looking at fat and wasn't like anti-meat, and then it migrates over with this guy Moten, Modern or whatever his name is. Now the attack is on red meat too. In addition,
he took it a step further.
He took it a step further, exactly. And it says here that red meat has long held a place of distrust in Western culture, but it didn't have to do with its health. It had to do with associated with greed and the power to incite sensuality and virility.
Ooh,
and that was
the whole
couldn't do that
spiritual life.
Well, the Seventh-day Adventist thing. That's what it.
They bring in the Seventh-day Adventists.
How did they think people get into the world is what I want to know.
Well, yeah, immaculate conceptions, I guess.
I suppose, but
we can't all be Jesus.
Well, I'd heard about the Seventh-day Adventist studies before and how so much is based on them. One thing I learned, which I was really surprised about, with when they did the study of the Seventh-day Adventists, they said that the diet itself was assessed only once in 20 years, and then only for subjects who chose to return a questionnaire. And it creates distortion because people who participate tend to be healthier than those who don't or can't or don't. So I was thinking, I've never really dug into the Seventh-day Adventist study, but I was thinking that maybe it was at least they were tracking these people's diets pretty closely, but apparently not.
Nope.
I mean, one questionnaire in a 20-year period. is what they use to base their data on.
It doesn't even make any sense. Like, no rational person would. It's because as a society we don't look into this stuff. Like, I mean, first of all, why would we? Most people would be bored to death by it, right? And they just live their lives and go on. But I think they don't realize the impact that this has on society, and that it comes from just total junk science.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for us, eating carnivore, keto, or low carb diet we kind of need to know this, because we're kind of in a position where we're defending our food choices.
Yeah. And that's the only reason why I'm interested in this, is because I have to know why I'm doing what I'm doing, why it's actually working. I need to have the actual information behind it, especially like I was talking to Carrie last night in the other Carrie's chat. Was it last night? Not
Yeah,
anyway.
it was. Yeah.
And we were talking about, I got the ketogenic textbook, and I was joking that we should go online and read it for fun to each other. And I'm serious, because
I will.
I'm
I'll
such
do
a nerd about it, because we have to know exactly how this works in our body. We have to be scientific about it.
Yeah.
And and that's, I mean, it's great that it works, and it's great that like you can do it and you don't have to know any details about that. But for me, I have to know, because I have to be able to explain it to other people. And I don't know, I'm one of those people. I have to know why.
Well, I think
can't
it's
just do
also
something.
helpful to know, like, if you talk to somebody who's questioning our diet, and they may be bringing up these studies, they may be bringing up these things and quoting things as fact, like red meat causes heart disease, or red meat causes colon cancer, or, high fat you're going to die of a heart attack. And they're basing what they're saying on what the government has told them, based on these really flawed studies. And so if we're going to be able to counter what they're saying, it really helps if we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And we can say, okay, well, this is the study that idea came from, and this is what's wrong with that study. I mean, I'm gonna have to study this a lot more to be able to come up with it on the top of my head, but
Yeah.
at least I could say, here, there's a book that's really helpful that'll help explain. Home 6 book. It says a lot of Adventists are not on vegetarian diets. Yeah, and you don't have to be. I mean,
Yeah, but
a lot of the
people that originated all this stuff, they were, and they wanted everybody to be. So now
like
their own people aren't even, that's irony for you.
I can tell the people who are vegan, who don't supplement or anything, because they have this gray, like, pallor, which is a little scary when you look at it. But one thing that's interesting is that, like, my husband's Seventh-day Adventist cousins live in British Columbia, Canada, and she's vegetarian, he's vegan, her husband's vegan. In Canada, I just heard just recently made stricter regulations on supplements, like even vitamin C, all these basic supplements, or that they're actually like they're getting more restricted, so that people can't just go buy them over the counter. So when I just heard the news about that maybe a week or so ago, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are all the vegetarians going to do? Because they have to have their supplements. And so I don't know if there's going to be a lot of them who are going to end up having to modify their diet so that they can get the nutrients. If they end up having trouble, they can't get their vitamins.
And I was kind of surprised by in this book where it said that a lot of Seventh-day Adventists eat eggs. I didn't know. I didn't realize that they did. I thought most of them were vegan. Well, not most of them, but I thought the ones that were vegan.
Yeah, no, a lot of them are vegetarian. It did say they'll eat eggs and cheese, and there's some that don't. I mean, there are varying degrees of strictness.
Yeah.
In what they eat.
Just like any church, like,
yeah,
there's always, well, just like anything, period. I mean, look at, we like to joke around that we're not a religion. The carnivores. I mean, there's so many varying. Like your carnivore is not mine. It's not his. It's not hers.
And we can just as equally fall into the trap of it becoming an ideology as well. And
I mean, I talk about it so much. Honestly, I'm like, I meet up.
But I think that it becomes an ideology when you start to make blanket statements like everybody should be doing what I'm doing. Everybody should be doing it this way.
Yeah.
And I really feel like everyone needs to find their own, what works for them. And okay, yeah, I mean, and I talk to people, I'm like, not everybody needs to be as strict as I am. Most carnivores aren't as strict as I am. I've just found with my immune system disease, I have to be really strict. But, some people do great on a ketogenic diet, and they do include some, vegetables in their diet, and they do fine. I didn't, but, I just think it turns into ideology when you start putting everything into a box.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that towards the end of the chapter 5, they had that picture on time of the 2 eggs and the frowny bacon, right?
Yes.
So after an NIH consensus conference, so these scientists had to huddle together to, I don't know, basically kind of validate that, I think we're going in the right direction, that, cholesterol is bad, saturated fat is bad. They had to huddle together and hold hands. And to your point, Lynn, that was, I think, Aaron's guy, his final swan song, because he couldn't, get grant funding right after that conference in 1984. Could you imagine a carnivore consensus conference happening? I can't really imagine that happening.
Well, I mean, that's why we're working on this documentary, Oh, we lost Kim. Where'd you go, Kim? But I mean, I've got my Healing Humanity shirt on. That's why we're working on this documentary, is because we're jumping all over the place.
Wow.
Well, I just got kicked out, so I don't know how that happened. But
I mean, we want to be able to represent in the documentary an alternative and something that needs to be considered by the medical community, by the healthcare community, as a valid option for how to eat. I mean, any time with healthcare, I mean, any doctor should say, look, here are your options. Here's what I recommend, but here are all your options. And of course, it's the patient's decision what they choose to do, whether it be medication, diet, whatever. This just needs to be on the list of options that doctors can recommend. But good luck. I mean, look at we're going to have people in Washington lobbying. And we've talked about that on our Healing Humanity Committee, that at some point we're probably going to need to have a branch of where we do have lobbyists that are in there kind of supporting this way of eating and getting these people in Congress to start educating them and teaching them about this. Because you look at all of the years of what they went through to get their dietary, everything passed. I mean, all of the committee work and the bad science, and you're going to have to turn them around and get them to admit that that was bad science. That's not an easy task at all.
Well, that's true. And then, of course, they try to say that people aren't compliant with their recommendations. And au contraire, people are very compliant. And, they eat their healthy whole grains, and they eat the fruits and vegetables. But here's the thing, too. They lump fruits and vegetables in together. And, of course, fruits are sweet. I mean, they're sugar packets, basically. Grapes. Have you seen a grape? I mean, grapes are huge, and they're just so sweet. I mean, I remember the last time I had a grape, and it's been a few years back. And I just remember that, golly, this is like candy.
Oh, and now they've got cotton candy ones.
They've got cotton candy grapes.
I don't even want to know how they make those.
Oh my God! I don't even want to know the modifications.
Probably a hybrid.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Well,
but then they talk about people haven't followed the recommendations. and that we need to get back to eating like we ate in the early days of the country. And here's what surprised me in this
Glad
book.
you're bringing that up. Yeah.
Yes, that we barely ate vegetables. Vegetables were considered nutrient deficient.
Yeah.
And we didn't eat them like they say we did.
But
it's like, especially leafy vegetables, like the ones that they, preach to us today, they weren't worth the time. The ROI wasn't there. They weren't nutritious. They didn't provide enough sustenance. And so they didn't.
I wondered like how, I was really interested in this section called How Americans Used to Eat, because I kind of wrote in the margin, because in the section where it talks about the justification for this whole getting away from animal products, that our ancestors lived mainly on fruits, vegetables, and grains. That idea comes mainly from the USDA food disappearance data.
Yeah.
I had never heard of that before, but it says the disappearance of food is an approximation of supply. Most of it is probably being eaten, much of it's wasted, but basically they're looking at now this is my understanding, correct me if I'm understanding this wrong, but my understanding is that they were looking at the transport of food products around the country as an indicator of what people are eating. And that didn't factor in all the people eating local, and that let's see, anything produced local, like the meat, the dairy, the fresh foods wouldn't have been included, they said.
Right.
I find it, I was struggling with really understanding how they came up with this, but kind of that's the idea that I got, is that they were tracking the supply chain of food, and to give them an indication of how we used to eat. And they came to the conclusion that we ate mainly fruits, vegetables, and grains. And I was like,
well, the disappearance of all the fruits and vegetables was probably that they're just all rotten.
And, right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they put a lot of waste, but yeah. So I'm like, that kind of answered a little bit. How did we get, because like with carnivores, when you talk to carnivores, it's like, it's obvious. We used to eat a meat-based diet. I mean, our ancestors ate because they hunted, right? The hunter-gatherer thing. They very little produce and only, mostly meat and fat. How did we get to make that leap from knowing that our ancestors ate mostly meat to suddenly knowing that they ate fruits, vegetables, and grains? And it was based on this USDA food disappearance data. I was like, what?
And then the data prior to that was even worse. And so they, Nina delves into the, like just previous writings. And like, for example, there was this, on a Southern plantation, I mean, they ate like no vegetables. It was all meat. And like you had a steak for breakfast. I mean, that was breakfast was steak and eggs.
Yeah, and even the slaves, they said even the slaves, they were eating meat. They had a large, what'd she say, like 100, the average was like 175 pounds a year of meat. And she said the early settlers were considered indifferent farmers. According to many accounts, they were fairly lazy in their efforts at both animal husbandry and agriculture, because basically hunting was easy, that game was so abundant, and they just had to go out, and they said wild turkeys, ducks, grouse, pheasants, they could just go out, migrating flocks of birds, they said, would darken the skies for days, so they could just sit there, and
they said that there was little point in farming since the meat was so readily available.
It was abundant, right? Exactly.
I mean, why would you want to take months and months and months to grow something that you've got to? I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to grow a garden before, but
I used to all the time.
It's not easy.
No, it's
I've
not.
had more than one failed attempt at just a single or 2 or 3 plants, just a
Right.
single little row.
I used to garden. I used to have quite a
It's
garden, and
it's hard work.
lettuce grows really well here in the Pacific Northwest because it's a little more mild of a climate. I'd struggle with tomatoes because they need a lot of heat. But I'd still get tomatoes like August. But yeah, lettuce grows like crazy here. So I always used to plant a ton of lettuce, and I'd go out into the garden and I'd harvest everything, and I'd have cucumbers and I'd have tomatoes and lettuce and green beans and sometimes peppers. I mean, I used to grow all that stuff. And
It's just my point is it takes just so much work and so
lot
long where you
work.
could just, I mean, think about it. If you were one of our ancestors, would you rather do all that, or would you rather just be like, I think I'll go out and kill some squirrels and a rabbit,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and then she also said, this is interesting too. A European traveler described his visit to a southern plantation, noted that food included beef, veal, mutton, venison, turkeys, and geese, but does not mention a single vegetable. Infants were fed beef even before their teeth had grown in.
Yep.
I didn't know that. And that's where
I didn't know that either. And
Yeah.
that falls in with Dr. Berry, how they've raised their children, giving them ribs to gnaw on when they're cutting teeth.
Yeah.
He said they clean so much meat off the bone that the dog doesn't even want it.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, so she said for the first 250 years of American history, even the poor in the United States could afford meat or fish for every meal. And now, like, how many of you have heard when you tell people you're carnivore, isn't that expensive?
I mean, I want to do a video about all the money that I'm saving now that I'm carnivore. We should make that like a topic video and all get in on it.
Let's do. That's a great idea.
In your spare time, Lynn,
How easy is it? Oh yeah, my daughter's getting married in less than 3 weeks.
Oh dear. You really don't have any spare time.
Right now, I don't have much spare time. Yes. And of course, she's kind of a little freaking out a little bit, as the day approaches. And it's going to be fun. But yeah, we're now in the last kind of the little sprint towards the end of getting her married. Our last one, I'm going to be an empty nester.
It's like, woohoo! Party!
I can't even imagine.
I'm going to miss her. But it just, it sure does make it. Food is easy though when you eat this way.
I mean, that's why I prefer carnivore over keto. Is it's just so much less to worry about. Like, I want it to be quick, easy, and delicious. And
exactly,
always that.
Like, for example, one of the easiest things I did, one of the best decisions, and I think I'm going to do a video, or we can talk about it when we do our saving money video. But I signed up for Kroger Boost, okay, and it's for $60 a year. I mean, so okay, $5 a month. You get free delivery. Now, this could be really helpful for a lot of people because it's easy for anybody to be tempted when you're walking through the store and you just see this and you grab this and grab that or whatever. Yeah. Whereas when you're actually in the app, you have to be consciously looking for something. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So,
and then also you can take things out. Like if you wanted to spend only $150 and you see that you're at $250, you can be like, oh, that can wait till next week, and just, I love it because I walk in the grocery store and I just lose my mind. I don't know.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I spent this week, it was a little over $60 on my groceries. And I bought eggs, bacon, ground beef, some beef bacon. But I mean, but I'm going to have my meals for the whole week based on that. I mean, some of it was ground beef and some of it was the burger patties. But anyway, $60. Now, granted, I'm one person, but still, and I did not buy, I could if I wanted to. I just didn't get any steaks this week.
And you're
I
not
had it
hungry as
delivered to my house.
often. Like even over the last few days when I was out, away with my daughter and her bridal party, and we stayed at our timeshare, so it was like an apartment. There were 6 of us, and I had my steak. I had a ribeye for breakfast, but they had, they cooked breakfast, and they had bacon and eggs, but they had pancakes and berries and the syrup and all of that. And they were hungry for lunch. I wasn't hungry for lunch, so I didn't eat lunch. Dinner time came, and I was like, I could eat or I could not eat. And everyone's like, I'm starving, and it's like they ate. Like for me, I just, one piece of meat lasted me for so many hours, and I did end up having another steak for dinner later. But and they were snacking all day too. It's like it's like if you factor that in, it's not just the cost of the actual meat, it's what else are you not eating and not buying all throughout the day because you're satiated.
Exactly.
All the medications.
Like this morning, I had ground beef and 5 eggs for my breakfast and some bacon. And I am not, my brother's coming over later to hang out. And so we're probably just going to have some burger patties and bacon.
Oh, y'all want to hear something funny? I was before we started, I was trying to hurry up and make some burger patties. And I asked my son, I said, "Do you want some burger patty? You want some hamburgers?" And he said, "Yeah." And I looked, and we're out of bread because my husband's hardly eating bread now. He's doing kind of a keto-ish. And of course, I don't eat bread. And so I don't even notice when we run out. And I have 4 boys, and if none of them tell me, then I don't know. And so I had 1 hot dog bun. So I told him, I said, "Ryan, I want you to pick up that burger with cheese on it and just hold it in your hand like a man and take a bite." I'm like, just pretend you're a carnivore for just a few minutes. And he's like, "No, Mom, I'm not doing that." And finally, I think he got hungry enough because I was describing like, oh, how good it was, and how because I was just standing there, gnawing on mine basically in my hand. And finally, I want y'all to know, he's 16 years old. He finally picked it up, and he was like, and I could tell that it was obviously good. He ate the whole thing.
Well, you
and
don't
then
have
I took the other.
Good.
Yeah. And then I took the other one, and I took that 1 little hot dog bun. I said, okay, we can either cut it in half and lay it long ways, or we can just stick it on there and pretend that it's so big it's just hanging out the sides. So I just stuck it on there and kind of mashed it down a little bit. But, that's better for him because he only ate 1 bun instead of 2.
Well, in the government, according to the book, did you read where they said that initially when they said you were supposed to increase your carbohydrates, that they said they were recommending everybody had 13 pieces of bread a day?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You just sit there eating bread in your hand.
It's like, seriously, they just had no idea what to recommend. So it's like, okay, let's just eat a ton of bread. Yeah.
I love the part where they were like, we cannot afford to wait. Like, let's push this through real quick, because people are dying, and we need to get these dietary, goals established for Americans, because they wouldn't know what to eat without the overreach of the government. I mean, why wouldn't they just leave us alone?
People are so dumb. We have to tell them what to do.
Yeah. Like, why do you think that we need you to tell us everything? Like, you're not our mom and dad, okay? Just stay in your place.
I just wonder if anybody throughout the course of all these studies even said, why are we studying animal fats? Why are we studying, like for the ones who study red meat, why are we studying things that have been around for centuries, that people have been eating forever? Why don't we study something that we haven't been eating a lot of until recently, like sugar?
Well, they were studying sugar, but they didn't like the results, and so they suppressed it. I mean, there were studies that pointed to sugar.
Sugar falls.
Was it Yudkin? Was it Yudkin who was? I think that's who that was. I'm not sure if she's mentioned him yet in the book. I've been reading several different things recently, but I know that John Yudkin, I believe was the, but anyway, and Ludwig, wasn't his name? Lustwig. Yeah. I know those are two people who's.
They convinced themselves that we didn't eat meat before, which was just, yeah.
I think I heard Dr. Westman say, I don't know that he said this, but he's repeating somebody else, but he said, it's hard to blame an old food for a new disease. So I think part of what, Nina Teicholz is portraying here is that required a lot of revisionist history, right?
Yes.
Because in order to blame meat, red meat and saturated fat as causing, heart disease, you have to be convinced that it is a new thing that just sudden popped up, no matter how counterintuitive that is. I think that's a lot of what they're trying to do, and what she's trying to balance that narrative with is, a lot of people ate meat beforehand, so.
Yeah, so they had to change the historical record and convince everybody that people didn't eat meat. They ate the grains and the fruit and the vegetables, which, is interesting. It just amazes me that we are so gullible as a society. And I think it's a fear-based, right? Because it's like after the president had the heart attack, everybody was freaked out. And it's like, okay, just tell us what to do and we'll do it.
I think a lot of it was, this was before the internet. So as a whole, other than through, people we watched on TV, like journalists, which, I mean, they could be good or bad, good at their job or bad at their job. But, as a whole, we didn't really have a strong way to communicate with each other, we couldn't get online and just have discussions like this and with people that we didn't even know from all across the globe. I mean, when you think about it, it's still kind of shocking that we can do this now. And for the average person going through their average day, and their routine, they're not going to be that worried about, and they wouldn't even consider things that, once you hear of the idea of, say, even carnivore, I would have never considered it. I thought, that is crazy. That person's lost their mind.
I will tell you, though, that there were old people who, like, for example, my ex-husband's grandmother, they would chide her for eating her country ham and all that stuff. And she's like, we've been eating country ham forever. She says, that ain't going to kill me. It's all this newfangled stuff that's going to kill me. And she was righter than
she was right.
But,
yeah, I wanted to bring up this one last section here that I thought was really interesting, where they're talking about, the all-cause mortality being the pitfall of the cholesterol lowering trials. And she says, bizarrely but consistently, men whose cholesterol had gone down were found to die at significantly higher rates from suicides, accidents, and homicides. Yes. And then they
because their mood just wasn't right.
Yeah. In fact, it said a meta-analysis of 6 cholesterol lowering trials found that this was the case across all these trials. It wasn't just one trial that showed this, that they were more likely to have depression, which we know. I mean, we know that it affects your mental health. And
I mean, when you think about it on a realistic level, like on a common sense level, it's like, it's not just depression or anxiety or whatever. These people have brain inflammation from what they're eating.
Right.
And when you think about the seriousness of that, I mean, if you have brain inflammation, you're going to be out here doing crazy things like killing people and killing yourself. And, it's
and taking chances and risks and behaviors.
I think between chapters 4 and 5, the one thing that kind of occurred to me was that, saturated fat, red meat, cholesterol, they never really had a good scientific lawyer to kind of explain that, like cholesterol does important things in your body besides, allegedly contribute to heart attacks so I think what I appreciate with the carnivore and keto community is that there's, a little bit more balance to that narrative that, your cholesterol is important to build, hormones. You need this stuff to fight infections and so on and so forth. So that's just the one thing that occurred to me is just that, cholesterol, red meat, they never had a good lawyer.
You're right. Yeah, it was demonized. You're right. They needed a defense attorney. And you think that doctors would be that though, because they have to study the role of cholesterol in the body. We know it's part of the cellular membranes and it's responsible for transporting nutrients into the cells. You'd think that doctors would speak up.
But it doesn't have to do with their daily life, like their daily life, seeing these people and each patient having a totally different problem. It falls by the wayside. It's like those things that I keep thinking, oh, I need to do that. I need to look into that one day. They just don't have time. They're just spread so thin. And even the really good ones, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. It's just sad. But this book is so, like, these 2 chapters, it would take us 4 or 5 hours if we were to really cover what's actually in these. So if you are interested in this at all, I would definitely get it and read it. Because, we can provide little anecdotes on things, but it's not, I mean, we're not even getting into the meat of most of these 2 chapters.
Yeah, definitely it's involved in it, but it is very well worth taking the time to read through it. And even going back, like I've had to go back and reread some of it.
Yeah, I had to do it twice this time.
I'm truly comprehending what I'm reading and to make sure that it sinks in.
There's so much.
So good. Yeah.
And there's so many studies. I'm just like trying to keep these. I've heard these same studies over and over again now, and I'm still trying to keep them straight in my mind because there are just so many of them. But you can know that the result, no matter what the study, the result is not really that conclusive of much. You can say that for all of them.
and I like the fact that she goes into a lot of detail about what they excluded. All these other adverse events that occurred that they didn't even. It's like, oh, we're not going to talk about that. I think everybody's doing a show on 12 food ingredients used in America that are banned in Europe. Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
And the quality of the ingredients too in Europe. I think they've got a lot stricter guidelines too, like with the pesticides and things, that they use. So awesome. So are we going to do chapter 6 and 7 for?
Yeah, we might as well stick with the 2.
I think so.
Yeah. I want to read you guys a comment that was left on my page last week.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
People would do well to understand that Nina I can't say her name, Teicholz, has no training in medicine or nutrition or scientific research, thank God, or in any discipline that might be useful in examining this topic. And it shows. She simply doesn't know what she's talking about in a nutshell, and she doesn't understand basic physiology or nutrition. She is paid very handsomely by a Texas billionaire to do animal ag propaganda. Just wanted to put that out there.
Okay.
Well, now, isn't that interesting, though, that she supposedly doesn't know what she's talking about, etc., but yet the guidelines that we are forced to follow to this day. I mean, maybe individually we're not forced, but I mean, our schools and the, government funded programs, things like that are forced. And those that they were written by somebody who had no clue, didn't know. A journalist. Imagine
and
that.
I can't think of anybody better than a journalist to research something. And guess what? Just because you have letters behind your name, that doesn't mean that you're a super smart person. You know how many doctors I've met that I'm like, oh, good grief. Nurses, biochemists. I mean, it doesn't mean that just because you have earned a degree, it doesn't mean that you know everything. It definitely
and
doesn't.
a good journalist knows to question everything.
Yeah.
And to really dig in and yeah. So yeah, well,
I'm just saying,
everybody's entitled to their opinion.
But we've really upset somebody by reading her book. So,
well, I mean,
I'm just saying their whole point.
I'm going to have to reserve I'm going to have to reserve my judgment about that till the end of the book. So,
yeah.
Well, and
we'll
show us where she's wrong.
Yeah. You want to come on? Come on.
Yeah. If you've read the book and you can point out where she's wrong, then, let us know.
I should have said, thanks for watching.
That's usually what I do when somebody posts some snark.
Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't watch, though. They probably just wanted to come and
they probably haven't even read the book.
Poop and go.
Now, and if somebody has an informed criticism, bring it on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you've read this book, you've dug in, you studied it, you understand it, you see flaws and things in what she says, come on,
let's talk about it. We want to see all sides. That's why we're here,
Right. But if you're just quoting somebody you heard and you didn't actually dig in and do it, then, go do your homework and then come back.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, I've got to go. It's almost 6:30 and I've got to go take my boys to lessons. So
thank you, Charlie.
Thanks Charlie for joining us.
Yeah.
It's been fun, and you should come back and join us again.
Yeah,
yes,
putting in all the work reading.
All right, so we will see you guys next week for chapters 5 and 6.
6 and 7.
I'm sorry, 6 and 7. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, but I was in the middle of talking, so I wasn't processing. 6 and 7, chapter 6 and 7 next week. So we'll see you guys next week.
All right.
Bye, everybody.